Good. All right. So your client is the U.S. government, and what they're interested in is workers' compensation. And the case has a lot of details to it, but what we're interested in right now for this part is figuring out the total amount of workers' comp that's paid out. Now, workers' compensation is the amount that employer pays when one of its employees is hurt on the job.
Yeah.
So say somebody breaks their leg in a factory and they have to take a month off of work, then the company has to continue to pay them even while they're not there.
Okay.
And they have to pay their hospital and medical bills and everything. And that constitutes the entirety of workers' compensation.
Okay.
Now, for the sake of this, however, we are interested in how much kind of lost wages are on the table with workers' compensation.
Okay.
So don't worry about the medical expenses. What we want to know is for the entire United States, how much are companies paying people who are on workers' compensation, but not actually working?
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Great. So our client's the U.S. government, and in particular, the U.S. government for this project. There's a piece of it where we're interested in the total amount paid out in workers' comp, and specifically, we want to talk about lost wages in the U.S.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep.
And is this on a per year basis that you want me to come up with the total?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. So I have a few ideas on how it is that we can tackle this, but what I'd like to do is just lay out a structure here that'll be probably more like a math equation, and then we can pick up this conversation in just a minute, if that's okay.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So I think we can tackle this in 3 basic steps. So in order to get the total amount paid per year on workers' compensation, basically we need 3 pieces of data. One is the average number of workers that are hurt per year, and hurt in such a way that they would need workers' compensation. Then we need to multiply that by the average time that they're out of work, so that they're paying the lost salary. And specifically, those would be days that they would be working. And then we would multiply that by the average wage, and that would give us a good estimate for the total amount paid per year.
Okay.
So in terms of the average time out of work per employee, I mean, this one we're probably going to end up making an estimate here, and then also for the average wage. This first piece I think is going to take a few steps. I can think of 2 basic ways to do this. Just a quick and dirty estimate, we could take the GDP of the US and divide that by 50,000, since that's the average wage per household. That would give us a quick and dirty number of working households. I don't think that's going to give us as robust of an answer as we might want here and what we could do in maybe 20 minutes. I think if we do more of a top-down approach and start with the US population, and then from that whittle that down to the number of workers in the US, so the working population, I think it's going to make sense to segment those then into blue collar and white collar, because there's going to be different hurt rates, I guess, between those. And then we can whittle that down to total amount injured per year. I think that might be a good way to go. Does that sound appropriate?
I think that's probably best. Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got about 10 minutes to do it, so let's dig in.
Okay, great. Well, let's do this. So what I want to do is I want to start off making a few assumptions. I'm going to start off with an assumption that there are 320 million people in the US, which is a little high, but it's going to make the math a little easy. Then I'm going to assume that the average age that people live is 80 years. I think that represents reality pretty well, but it also divides into 320 pretty nicely. So if we also assume that the distribution in ages is pretty much the same, there's the same amount of people in each age group, then that gives us 4 million people per year, per age year. So then I think what I want to do here is I first want to segment the US population into different age groups because I think there's different percentages of people that work in each age group.
Sure.
Then we can get the working population. So most people don't work until like around 15. I think
16, right?
16 is the, okay, I'm sorry, that's the average, or that's when you can start working.
Right.
And then let's say 16 to 26 is probably going to be all people behaving around the same. That's people who have started high school and people who are maybe just finishing college. Some people may have finished a little bit earlier than that. But I think around there you're going to have around a similar population. Then if we say somewhere from just older than 26 to say maybe 46, that's going to be the largest working population. Then if we go from 46 to, let's just say 56, because that's around retirement, those are going to be people in kind of the sunset of their lives working a little bit less. Okay, so these are the different age groups. Okay, so if we're whittling this down into working population, let's next just do the number of people in each according to our assumptions. So we say 4 million people per year. We've got 10 years here, so that's 40 million. Let's see, we've got 26 to 46, that's 20, so we've got 80 mil. And then 46 to 56, we've got 40 mil. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is the percent that work.
So are you assuming then that everybody older than 56 is retired and not working?
Yeah, I think that's the assumption that I'm making.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that sound fair?
You know, it's probably not right, but for this, it's fine.
Okay, great. So the percent that work, okay, so people in high school and college, you know, a lot of people don't work in high school. I was one of the few of my friends that did. And especially in college, people have scholarships or rich parents, but some people do need to work. So I don't think it's quite 0% or 10%. I think it's a little bit higher. Let's say maybe 20%. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
Okay. I think 26 to 46 is going to be a large amount of the population. You know, really the only people who aren't going to be working in this age group are going to be people who are disabled, or, I mean, you may have some free riders who just live with their parents and don't need to work. So I think it's going to be pretty small. Yeah, it would be. So that's like 90% maybe.
Okay, so that to me feels a little bit high, possibly.
Okay.
Are there any other segmentations in that group that you might be missing?
Okay, so let's think about this. So I talked about people who could be injured, then just people who luck of the draw don't have to work. Trying to think what else could be in this 80 million.
What about maybe stay-at-home moms?
Oh yeah. Actually, that's a great point here. So really, I haven't considered gender in here with these numbers at all. So what I might want to do is whittle this down a little bit more. I think the most robust way is to split this in two and then say what percent work, but maybe just in interest of time, since we have 10 minutes, I'll just lower this percentage to say maybe 75%, and that should take care of stay-at-home moms.
Yep,
that sound okay?
That feels better.
Okay, great. And then, so 46 to 56, people are nearing retirement. I think it's going to be a little bit less, and if we also consider some stay-at-home moms as well, I think it's going to be somewhere like around 50%. Sound fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to have working population. Okay, so 20% of 40 million, I know 10% is 4, so 20% would be 8 million. 75% is the same thing as 3/4, so that's going to be 60 million. And then 50% of 40 million is going to be 20 million. Okay, so now I want to add these all up, because from here I'm going to segment this into white collar and blue collar. I think it's going to be pretty similar for each age group. I'm going to make that assumption here. So, I'm going to add this up here, and I'm going to have 88 million, let's just say 90 million, just to make the math easy here. So white collar, blue collar, the U.S. is becoming a lot more of a services type of economy. So I think there's going to be maybe a bit more on the white collar end. So let's say, let's say 50 million and then 40 million. That way it's just a little bit above 50%. Okay, so here we are. The next thing that I wanted to do is get like a percentage of people that are injured, that are in this type of working population. I think it's going to be higher for blue collar than white collar. So let's say that it's somewhere in the range of, say, maybe, I don't know, 10%. Maybe that's a little bit high. But, I mean, this one I'm really kind of having to go out on a limb here.
So what you're trying to figure out is
percentage of people that get injured in such a way that they need to take advantage of workers' comp
on a yearly basis.
On a yearly basis.
Let me clarify that assumption. So you're saying if somebody has a 30-year career,
and they have a 10% probability each year.
Like 1 in 3 people will be on workers' comp in their career.
Sure.
Is that what you're...
Yeah, so that does seem a little bit high. So maybe I should whittle this number down a little bit. Maybe like even like 1% might be a little bit more accurate. Does that feel fair to you?
Yeah, let's say 5. Let's just cut that in the middle and say 5.
Okay, so let's say 5%. Okay, so 5% of 40 million, I know 10% is 4, so half of that would be 2 million as a total. Okay, we're white collar, I think it's going to be really small. A paper cut doesn't really send you to the hospital, so, I mean, just because the number is a little bit easier to work with, let's maybe say 1%. Yep. So,
500,000 people.
Okay, yeah, so if that's the case, yeah, so we're talking about 500,000. So we're talking about 2.5 million people. And that was the first thing that I wanted here, that are hurt per year. We have 2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so average time out of work, like I said, I think we're going to have to make assumptions here. I actually had to take advantage of workers' comp when I was in high school. And I think that was actually pretty rare. But,
okay.
So I know that I took advantage of workers' comp for a week. It was when I was working at a pizza place and I had to lift the keg and I actually threw out my back. So, I think a week might be a little bit on the shorter end. Some people are out for like a month because, they just fall from a big height or have something dropped on them. So let's say maybe like 2 weeks is a good average.
Okay.
So that would be 14 days.
Okay, so that you're right in that 2 weeks is 14 days, but you're making an assumption that they work 7 days a week.
Oh, good call, good call. So since that's the case, we're talking about 10 days. So 10 working days. The average wage of an employee, most of our population is these people in kind of the working age group. So they're probably getting paid a pretty high amount. Let's say something, maybe like $15 an hour might be a good estimate.
Yeah, you can do that. So okay. You made the assumption that the average wage is like 50,000 in the United States, and that works out to be about $25 an hour.
$25 an hour? Okay, great. So let's go ahead and use that number. Okay, so now we've made all the assumptions that we need, and we've driven down to some numbers here so that we can get the total amount. So now I just want to multiply this through, and then that will give us our number for how much. Just doing this right here, so 10 times 2.5 million, that's 25 million. And then multiplying that by $25. Okay, so I'm actually realizing something here that I'm glad I caught. This is on just a per hour basis, so I need to make an assumption about how much they work per day.
Right.
To get that number right. Okay, so $25.
Let's just say 8 hours.
Yeah, let's just say 8 hours a day, so that's 80. So if that's 80 hours that they are out, I'm sorry, that's 80 when you multiply it by 10 days that they're out, multiplying that by 25, let me just do that here really quick, some 0. Okay, so that's $2,000 that basically they're having to pay out for every injured person. Okay, so this is actually 2,000, glad we caught that. Okay, great, so now we need to multiply this by our 25 million, and that's basically going to be $50 billion is going to be our end number. So let me write that right here, actually. So,
okay, so I think that might be a little bit high
so let's
based
see.
on your math.
Okay, so if we have $2,000, we multiply 2 times 25, that's going to be 50 million. Add another 3 zeros.
So I think that's your problem is in this 25 million times this 2,000.
Let me see here. Okay, so we have, this is $2,000 that they're paying out for every day. So 25 million workers times this is how many days?
So you actually have 2.5 million workers, right?
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so I double multiplied there.
You've already times that by 2.
Okay, great, good call. Okay, so now I just need to multiply this by 2.5 million.
Right.
And basically all I need to do here is
0.
just take off a 0, so we're talking about $5 billion as the end amount. So I mean, guess just gut checking this number, I mean, that seems like a pretty high amount. I'm not quite sure what to compare it to. But this is a number that the government could use just as an estimate for how much is paid out. I think if I were going to go back, though, and look at some of my assumptions I don't feel the best about, I think it was kind of a broad leap to say how many people are injured per year. I'd like to maybe do a search on that and see if I can find a number there. That would change it quite significantly. And then maybe also just the average amount of time that people are out per week. You know, if this changes by a bit, just by a small percentage, it actually hits this pretty hard. So I think those two things I'd want to check. But based on our assumptions here, I feel like that's a pretty good number.
Cool. Thank you.
Great.